terror comes to Bangkok. At least 16 people are killed by 2 explosions in Bangkok near a known tourist site. Local police says that one of the bombs was on a motorcycle. Reports mount on ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Islamist Hamas movement. The reports suggest that a senior Hamas delegation led by the group's leader Ismail Haniyeh will meet with the head of Egypt's General Intelligence Service. And Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has approved a controversial anti-terrorism law which sets up special fast-track courts and boosts police powers.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening and welcome to the news today. A huge blast ripped through the Thai capital Bangkok today, killing at least 16 people and wounding dozens more. The bomb went off near a popular Hindu shrine and near 3 major shopping centers. Ayman Siksik has the details.
At least 16 people killed and dozens injured in a massive bombing in the center of Thailand's capital, Bangkok. A scene of chaos and shock erupted next to a 5-star hotel, where a bomb planted on a motorcycle went off at 7 p.m. local time during rush hour. The location of the bomb, next to the well-known Buddhist Erewhon shrine and a major tourist attraction, is raising concerns that the blast may have been a terrorist attack, though no one has so far claimed responsibility. The victims of the bomb are mainly Chinese tourists. According to Thai sources, a second bomb was found in the area and defused. The Thai government immediately announced it will set up a war room to coordinate its response. Authorities have already stepped up security checks at major city intersections and in tourist areas for fear of further attacks. The Erewhon shrine is visited by thousands of Buddhists each day. Thai forces are fighting a low-level Muslim insurgency in the country's south. Bangkok is also a major gateway city for visitors from Islamic countries and has been used as a transit point for Southeast Asian Islamic radicals in the past. Meanwhile, emergency teams are tending to the injured from Monday's attacks, and the death toll is still expected to rise.
And with me right now here in the studio is Amir Oren, defense and government analyst for Haaretz Daily newspaper. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining.
Evening, Lucy.
Since when Thailand is on the terror map for terrorist organizations all over the world?
Well, that's just the problem, the one that you're pointing at. One has to look at the world map of terror and analyze it according to several dimensions. There are ideological or religious movements which know no borders. For them, they don't care whether it's Iraq or Syria or Libya or India. Any place, mostly where it's Muslim movements. Yes. There are some other movements or organizations which have local grievances. This seems to be the case in Thailand. So this is not apparently part of some world phenomenon, but a local event. This has to be said in caution until the investigation is over. But Thailand has known a lot of upheavals, a lot of military coups. It used to be quite a stable regime. It no longer is. And there is corruption, there is unrest, and while it's, of course, a tourist economy, it nevertheless cannot protect the tourists.
Let's join to this conversation. With us on the line right now from Bangkok is Alon Miller. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Good evening.
Alon, what are the chances that this attack is not a terrorist attack, but let's say some of the maybe unstable situation coming from economy, coming from social problems? What are the chances that it is not a terror attack?
Actually, it's very hard to say in this early stage of the investigation. I think it's to jump to conclusions fast. But the place that it took, the bombing took place, it's a place that has been known before as a place of political unrest, let's say like this, then maybe it's connected to that, but nobody can confirm yet, I think, in this early stage what is the cause.
What was the reaction in Thailand for these attacks, or let's say these events?
Actually, took everybody, I think, by surprise. Just yesterday, there was a big parade, bicycle riding for the Queen's birthday, a lovely, lovely event, and we've seen calm, I think, around 1 year, no violence or whatever. Then it took everybody by surprise, I think.
Yes, Alon Miller, unfortunately, we are hearing you a little bit in a blur, let's say, way. We will try to call you again.
Just to add to that, an Israeli, a prominent Israeli visitor who has just been to Thailand and left Saturday night or Sunday morning, also said that there was no indication, the situation did not seem explosive, there was no prior warning.
You know, we're looking right now at maybe at the indications that we're seeing maybe the Islamic State is spreading, is trying to show its power, also that it can get everywhere and anywhere that maybe Western visitors or Western tourists are in, because the target, we know, for IS are Europeans, are people who are coming from the West. So maybe it can, let's say, be rational that this can be something that the IS planned.
You know, this is one distinction between Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. The Islamic State wants to have it all now, and it wants to spread all over without any limits and any stages, while Al-Qaeda, which seems prudent by comparison, one already misses the old Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda wants to do it gradually. Now, the targets are not Western tourists per se, but the regimes. The tourists could be the means towards the end, but the end is to stabilize the regime and replace it by parts of the caliphate, because you have the center of the caliphate in the Middle East, in Iraq or in Syria, and you have the various provinces. It seems far-fetched right now to think that old Siam, Thailand, is going to be one of these provinces, but one should not look too much for rationality in this terror.
Yes, always we should not look for rationality. Amir Orn, thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Lucy.
And we're coming back to the region. Persistent reports in the Arab media claim that Israel and Hamas are discussing a long-term truce, whose main points are an end to the 8-year-long blockade on the Gaza Strip in return for a halt to rocket fire from the enclave. A senior Hamas delegation is on its way to Egypt, where the truce will apparently be discussed. Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas, meanwhile, is far from pleased that Israel is set to be negotiating with the greatest rival of his Fatah party. I-24 News reporter Elia Khomberg has more.
Exactly 1 year ago, Israel and Hamas, which rules the Gaza Strip, were still pounding each other in their latest round of fighting, also known as Operation Protective Edge. But now, it seems that the bitter rivals are heading for a semi-permanent solution in the form of a long-term ceasefire, which could be the biggest turning point in years in the regional long-running conflict. After long months of unconfirmed reports and ambiguous rumors, and only a day after a senior Turkish official said a long-term ceasefire is imminent, a senior Hamas delegation is heading to Egypt.
Direct negotiations with the Israeli occupier are not on the agenda of Hamas. If negotiations are necessary, they must be indirect.
The delegation, which is led by the group's leader Ismail Haniyeh, will meet with the head of Egypt's General Intelligence Service, Khalid Fawzi, to discuss the truce. Afterwards, reportedly, Fawzi will visit Qatar and Turkey, who mediated the impending agreement. According to reports, Hamas will agree to a 7 to 10 year long ceasefire in return for Israel lifting its 8-year-long blockade on the Gaza Strip and establishing a naval passageway between the Strip and Cyprus. A possible prisoner swap might also be a part of such an agreement. This potential breakthrough comes after months of indirect talks through mediators, mainly former British Prime Minister and Middle East Quartet envoy Tony Blair. According to reports in recent days, Blair met for the second time in less than 2 months Hamas leader Khalid Mashal in Qatar to discuss the formula of the looming ceasefire. Reports further indicated that an Israeli delegation arrived in Cairo last week, led by Yitzhak Molcho, special envoy of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, to meet with Egyptian security officials. Such an agreement, even if inked soon, is not necessarily good news for all Palestinian factions. A deal between Israel and Hamas could easily be seen by the Palestinian Authority as an attempt to bypass it and might trigger an even greater divide between Hamas-ruled Gaza Strip and Fatah-ruled West Bank. But in any case, for Gazans and Israelis, such an agreement, if realized, could mean a completely different future than the one they expected.
And joining me right now here in the studio is Middle East analyst Avi Sahal. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
So, what is happening here?
We don't know. We really don't know. I mean, it's a kind of a mystery for me, I have to admit that. Because we hear so many different statements coming from Hamas, coming from Turkish diplomats or Turkish officials that visited Gaza, and they are claiming that Gaza is on the eve of or near to reach kind of a long-term ceasefire agreement, a Tahdiya agreement. Now, contradicting to that, we hear all kinds of statements or non-official statements coming from the Israeli side saying this is not true, there's nothing going on, especially from the security apparatus. But the political apparatus, meaning the Prime Minister's office, is keeping things very quiet and he's trying not to say too much about this issue. There's a negotiator going on between the two sides. His name is Tony Blair. He used to be the Prime Minister in Britain. He used to be the Quartet envoy, but he's not anymore in an official job. This is part of the mystery. What is Tony Blair doing in this region, going on from Qatar to Turkey to Egypt to Israel, talking to everyone about what exactly?
Before I will talk to you about how come Egypt is in the middle when Egypt right now, with all the terror laws and taking out Hamas and declaring Hamas as a terror organization, how come Egypt got into the middle of this and negotiating with this? Just a second. I want to join to this conversation, phone call from the Gaza Strip with activist and Gaza resident Maha Mahana. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
So, Maha, you're hearing these reports and the people in the Gaza Strip are happy, or they are saying, okay, we're hearing a lot of these rumors lately and none of them are true because our situation is totally different?
People here are divided, you know, and the majority are with the truth, and not only with the truth. They don't need only long-term truce or ceasefire. They need an everlasting peace agreement that they can ensure that they live a normal life like the rest of the humanity, not just a truce. And some people here say that, you know, we keep hearing about this and nothing of this will happen, especially that Israel promised to lift the blockade, and we don't believe that this can happen easily, especially that the law is not involved in the agreement, and especially also the PLO opposing the agreement because they are not consulted. You know, they say that this will detach from the West Bank and Jerusalem, and this means, you know, if
Maha.
Yes.
Yeah, Maha, what do the people say about the same fact that you're mentioning right now, that the Palestinian Authority is not part of it, that Hamas is actually going for a truce or, let's say, a long-term agreement with the same rival, with the same enemy that it was fighting 1 year ago?
Yeah, you know, the problem here is that people don't believe everything until they see a change on the ground. We hear about that there are agreements and there are talks between Hamas and Israel. It's not mentioned in the media, but, you know, through mediators. And we know that the PLO is you know, they have their own negotiations with Israel. And people here are divided. They want to see something on the ground. When they see the blockade is lifted, and when they see the borders are open, and when they see that workers from Gaza can go to work in Israel, or you know, at least they can live life. You know, here in Gaza, we live without 20 hours of power outages every single day. We don't have running water. We have nothing here. We need things on the ground so that we can believe that the agreement is true.
Maha, do people really want to go back and work in Israel or work with Israelis?
Yeah, many people here want to. Many people who used to work before, and they still have good relations, even their bosses there. They used to work in Israel. They of course, many people, if you open the opportunities, it's up to them. But many of them would go for the opportunity because there are no jobs in Gaza. You know, if the situation is calm and the situation is peaceful, of course, you know, why not? Of course, Israel will not accept anyone except they have security clearance. And many people in Gaza have security clearance because the majority of people in Gaza are not with Hamas, they are not affiliated with Hamas. But, you know, we all are subject to collective punishment here.
Yes, definitely. Mahana, thank you very, very much for this phone call with us. Thank you. The people on the Gaza Strip are also confused. They don't understand what is happening, not even to mention the fact that the reconstruction that we've been talking about for such a long time, it's not actually happening on the ground.
It's not happening in a wide range, let's say, but it does happen. I mean, some things are changing very slowly,
Although
but
Israel is letting like some trucks getting in.
It is many trucks, around 550 a day per day through Kerem Shalom, including everything for the reconstruction of Gaza. Other than that, I must say that I have the impression that Hamas here is trying to build kind of a feeling among the Gazans residents, a kind of a feeling among the international community and maybe even in Israel that something is going forward about the ceasefire agreement, about the Tahdia agreement, but I'm not that sure that there is something real going on. Meaning they just yesterday tried to say that they're about to leave Gaza for a meeting in Arab capitals about a ceasefire agreement. But then it didn't happen. It turned out that they asked the Egyptian to leave, but the same Egyptian government that is planned to be part of the ceasefire agreement refused till now to let them go out or to leave Gaza to visit their friends like Khaled Mashal and others. So I think that there's something going on between Turkey and Hamas, that they are trying to build an image that there is a progress towards a long-term ceasefire, but for the meanwhile, the progress is very, very little and slow.
So just, you know what, let's see the reactions from south of Israel. Talks of a possible ceasefire between Israel and Hamas has been greeted with skepticism by Israelis living close to the Gaza Strip. I-24 News correspondent Shai Ben-Ari visited there today and saw and heard what they had to say about that.
Recent days and weeks have seen increasing reports of a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, the militant organization which rules over the Gaza Strip. The Israeli communities which surround Gaza have had to endure 3 conflicts in the last 6 years. Here, nurseries and kindergartens are built under special concrete fortifications and near bomb shelters. Residents greet the reports with some hope and optimism, even though the talk is of a temporary truce. Adele Raymer is a member of Kibbutz Nirim and can see the Gaza Strip from her home.
A temporary ceasefire would be fine. A permanent ceasefire would be better, but at least the temporary ceasefire would give us the feeling that we have some sense of security and being able to continue building, because this past year this community has needed a lot of healing.
But there is also much caution and concern that a temporary agreement could be taken advantage of. Merav Cohen lives in the neighboring Kibbutz Ein Shlosha. She agrees a temporary solution is better than none at all, but stresses she has no illusions.
We aren't naive, and we know very well they'll use every spare moment between conflicts to arm themselves. They don't deal much with peace and love. It's well known. They build tunnels. They rearm. That's what they do. They're a terrorist organization.
Any potential long-term ceasefire represents an opportunity for Hamas. Whether Hamas would actually use that opportunity to improve the lives of those living under its rule, or alternatively, to prepare for the next war with Israel, is a decision that could have ramifications for the entire region. Shai Ben-Ari, I-24 News, the Israel-Gaza border.
Also, the Israeli side are skeptic about what is happening there and if a ceasefire can actually happen. But again, I want to take us back. What is Turkey gaining from this? Putting, let's say, Egypt in a really problematic place, putting Israel in a problematic place when they are just declaring some kind of a ceasefire that is not happening.
I think you just answered the question. I mean, they are trying to put Israel in the corner, to put Egypt in the corner, and to portray an image that, yes, we are ready to do a major concession towards Israel, major concessions towards Israel and Egypt, but it's not because of Hamas, it's not because of us, Turkey. We're ready for reconciliation between us and Jerusalem. This is part of the idea here. And at the end, they're trying to blame Cairo and Jerusalem for the failure, not only for the negotiations between Turkey and Israel, but also for the long-term ceasefire between Hamas and Israel.
Where does it put Mahmoud Abbas in this specific case? Because we've been talking about this for a long time, that Mahmoud Abbas is threatening to just get out and give the keys and go
we
out.
might hear some kind of a statement coming out of his mouth in the next couple of weeks, meaning in September, saying, I am resigning. It doesn't mean that he will resign, by the way, but he might say, I resign. And there's a difference here between when leaders in the Middle East saying, I resign, and, of course, resigning de facto. Now, I would say that for Abbas, he's terribly afraid from the option that Hamas is closing a deal with Israel. This is why today he just said again that he knows that there are negotiations, direct negotiations between Israeli officials and Palestinian and Hamas Palestinian officials in African countries, in a third African countries. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, but then again, Abbas is terrified.
Where does it put Israel right now in the West Bank in a case that actually Israel will get some kind of an understanding with Hamas?
Well, not in a new place. It's still the same old situation, still old status quo. If Hamas will agree to a ceasefire agreement in Gaza, it doesn't mean a thing about the West Bank, but the opposite. Hamas, one of its principles is saying the ceasefire will be only for the Gaza Strip, not including anything regarding the West Bank.
Avi Sakharov, thank you very, very much for this.
Thank you, Lucy.
And Israel's High Court has postponed until Wednesday a decision on whether to release a prisoner from the Islamic Jihad who has been on a hunger strike for over 60 days. Elie Ochenberg sums up the latest developments in the case of Mohammed Allan.
At death's door, the Palestinian hunger striker imprisoned in Israel keeps on causing controversy. The Supreme Court decided to reconvene on Wednesday to hand down its ruling on a petition demanding his release. The hearing Monday morning came as Israel proposed freeing Mohammed Allan, an activist of Islamic Jihad from the West Bank, on the 64th day of a hunger strike, but only if he goes into exile for 4 years. His lawyers rejected the state's offer, claiming that it shows that his arrest was vindictive.
No for any proposal of leaving the homeland. He should leave the jail in order to be free in his house. This proposal is a very negative proposal.
Allan, who is unconscious, is currently being treated at the Israeli Barzilai hospital in Ashkelon, and his situation is defined as critical. So far, his doctors have decided to honor his wish not to receive medical treatment. Israel, which only recently approved a law enabling the forced feeding of hunger strikers, doesn't want Allan to die in jail and thus spark anti-Israeli demonstrations, but it also does not want to be perceived as giving in to pressure.
The alternatives are releasing the prisoners or letting him starve to death, and both are completely unacceptable in my opinion. Such a hunger strike is aimed at pressuring Israel, and we are not willing to cave in.
This delicate and complex moral issue have already raised a vast amount of public interest, with protests being held in favor and against his release.
And right now with me is military correspondent Shai Ben Arif from Ashkelon. Good evening. Shai, this specific situation is putting Israel in a really, really problematic place. Let's say, not even in a comfortable place. Not in front of itself, not in front of the Palestinian, and of course not in front of the international community.
Certainly, it's something of a standoff, something of a prisoner's dilemma, you could say, where Israel, I wouldn't say it doesn't know what to do, but there is a certain middle ground that needs to be reached here as far as the Israeli government is concerned. Obviously, it does not want to give in to the demands of the Palestinian prisoner himself, who is basically protesting his own state of administrative detention, actually releasing him. from administrative detention would be presented by the Palestinians as sort of a moral and political victory over Israel. So that really, as far as the Israeli government is concerned, is not an option. But basically, it also doesn't want to be perceived as some sort of immoral state that basically starves someone to death. That is why some sort of middle ground is really the attempt here. And the idea, what it's been offered by the state at the moment, is to actually allow Mohammed Dalan to leave the country for a period of 4 years. And therefore release him from, de facto, let's say, from his state of administrative detention. The situation here in Ashkelon is at the moment, I'll say it's calm, but it really is quite tense. Last night, real clashes broke out here between Israeli Arabs and right-wing protesters. There were some more minor incidents throughout the day today. At the moment, there's a very heavy security presence throughout the city. There's even a makeshift military checkpoint at the entrance to Ashkelon, where you see basically Israeli Arabs are not allowed, many of them are not allowed into the city, and some of them have protested on the outskirts of Ashkelon. We recently noticed a small group of Israeli Arabs being detained here at the entrance to the Barzilai medical compound before they were eventually allowed in to receive treatment, apparently.
You know, Shai, I'm trying to think with you. In a case that Mohammed Dalan will be deported and he will be, Israel will decide to get him out of Israel, what does it mean for the rest of the prisoners? Will Israel have to do the same punishment, let's say, towards the other prisoners, or it will have to release them and put them in the West Bank or actually take them to court?
Right. In any case, let's say if Israel does go forward with this initiative to sort of release Mohammed Dalan abroad, I very much doubt that would mark some sort of precedent that would then be offered to other Palestinians who are in administrative detention. In any case, Mohammed Dalan's legal representatives have more or less rejected this offer, saying that it is paramount to offering a choice between exile and administrative detention. That means detention without trial, and that is an immoral choice, as they put it. And many people in the international community are sympathetic to these arguments. In any case, as far as Israel is concerned, this represents some sort of middle ground, some sort of compromise that they hope the other side will adhere to. But at the moment, I'm not sure that represents a viable option for the Palestinians, at least.
Yeah, what is amazing to see is basically the non-reaction of the Palestinian Authority, who's for now just watching everything and not saying a lot. Military correspondent Shai Ben-Ari, thank you very, very much for this. And for now, we are going out for a small break, 2 minutes, and then I'll be back for the rest of the news today. 2 more minutes, and I'm here. Terror comes to Bangkok. At least 16 people are killed by an explosion in Bangkok near a known tourist site. Local police says that one of the bombs was on a motorcycle. Reports mount on ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Islamist Hamas movements. The reports suggest that a senior Hamas delegation led by the group's leader Ismail Haniyeh will meet with the head of Egypt's General Intelligence Service. And Egyptian's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has approved the controversial anti-terrorism law, which sets up special fast-track courts and boosts police powers. Welcome back to the news today. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has signed a tough new anti-terrorism law which could impose the death penalty and life sentences for some offenses, and at the same time threatens large fines for, quote, false reporting on terror attacks. Here's Ayman Siksik with more.
A crackdown on terrorism in Egypt as President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi approves the new law, introducing a series of severe punishments for what the government terms terrorist activity. The so-called anti-terrorism law aims to counter the Islamist insurgency that aims to topple al-Sisi as president. but has already drawn international concern for human rights organizations. Under the new LCC laws, trials for suspected militants will be fast-tracked, and those found guilty of joining a militant group could face 10 years in prison. Financing terrorist groups will carry a penalty of life in prison. Inciting violence or terrorist messages online will carry sentences of 5 to 7 years in prison, and journalists can be fined up to $64,000 for contradicting official accounts of militant attacks. The original draft of the law called for a 2-year prison sentence. El-Sisi has long been accused of curtailing freedoms won in the 2011 uprising that toppled Hosni Mubarak. El-Sisi has also been a fierce enemy of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, with several life imprisonments and death sentences delivered under his rule. The new anti-terrorism law also shields the Egyptian military and police from litigious claims on, quote, proportionate use of force in performing their duties. Sisi had promised a tougher legal system in July, after a car bomb attack in Cairo that killed the chief public prosecutor, the highest-ranking state official to be killed in years.
And with me right now in the studio is Ambassador Yitzhak Lebanon, former Israel ambassador to Egypt. Good evening.
Good evening.
On the paper, this looks as something good. But if we will look at the way that Egypt's regime is treating some of, let's say, the Muslim Brotherhood activists or people in the organization, that could also be under the definition of terror.
Look, if you read this new law, it is draconic. It is draconic because you have, they use more words such, the death penalty than anything else. It's obvious that El-Sisi wanted to know with this law, after what happened to the soldiers and the prosecutor, general prosecutor in Egypt, he wanted to put a law which will give him the authority, the legal authority, to execute the decisions taken by the tribunals, which is the death penalty to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Does he really need a law to execute people?
Yes, when you have pressure coming from outside, that you have to speak about democracy, you have to show that you are dealing, within this framework called or so-called democracy. So when you have a law adopted by the People's Assembly, by the government, and ratified by the president, it is a law. It is legal. It is something which belongs to the statehood. So he can always say, look, I'm working within these democratic laws, which has been adopted and promulgated by the government.
But can we define democratic? Because can we define democratic only by laws? Because, okay, we can say that Egypt maybe is the only democracy in the Arab world, but...
Lucy, let me stop you. When you are talking about democracy in Egypt, this has nothing to compare with the democracy that we learn or we know by the books.
So it's not only Egypt, it's all around the Arab world.
We are talking about Egypt. The maximum, in my mind, when you are talking about democracy in Egypt, is a big transparency, yes. Or to allow the others to express themselves. It's a kind of a freedom of expression, yes. But you don't have the inner system that you have in democratic countries like, Great Britain, United States, and with all modesty, even in Israel.
This, basically, this law is coming to maybe put the, let's say, death sentence of Mohammed Morsi legal?
He would like to have free hand. What the tribunal will decide. Well, the tribunal, they have the influence coming from the government, and we have seen in the last 6 to 7 months more than 1,000, death penalty about the people. Within this framework called, the terrorism law, this is the new law, you have also an article or a spot, speaking about journalism and reporters. Also there, at the original status, El-Sisi said that if you will have a reporter or a correspondent or a journalist who is propagating, false information, he will be sentenced to prison. So the association, the Journalists Association, approached him and they said, look, maybe you can change it. And he changed it. Instead of prison, now they have to pay money in order to be free.
So you're telling me if I'm getting an offer from an Egyptian TV station to say no?
No, I will answer you in French. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. Whatever it will change, it will remain the same.
Yes, and I couldn't say it better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy.
Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said today that Iran will remain close to U.S. influence and will continue to oppose U.S. policies in the Middle East despite its nuclear deal with world powers. He noted that either country can still block the accord. Khamenei's comments come a day after one of his advisors said that Iran and its allies must do all they can to curb American influence in the Middle East.
They thought this deal, and it is not clear if it will be passed in Iran or in America, will open up Iran to their influence. We blocked this path, and we will definitely block it in the future. The Islamic Republic will fully support anyone that stands up to the Israeli regime and embraces the resistance.
And joining me right now on set is Dr. Raz Zimet from the Alliance Center for Iranian Studies at the Tel Aviv University. Good evening.
Good evening.
So let's start for just at the beginning with the comments of we are not obliged to anything. Okay, we closed a deal. This deal is what? Not so close to us, and we're not actually sure with it, so we can break it whenever we want?
No, I think that unless Khamenei would approve the deal, there will be no deal. So when Zarif and Rouhani, well, they didn't sign it, but when they reached the deal, they were sure that Khamenei supports it. But first of all, he waits for the Congress. There's no need for him to say, well, I approve the deal until the Americans, until the Congress does the same.
So it's an ego thing.
First of all, it is ego. But the second issue is that he tries to maintain himself over the factional differences within Iran. There are hardliners in Iran who don't like the deal. And there are moderates who like the deal very much. So he tries to say, well, let us just wait and see. Each side, the hardliners and the moderates, are both saying, well, he supports our view. And let the game continue until he has to decide.
So he's like jumping from one wedding to another. In the meantime, Hamad Javad Zarif is meeting Lavrov in Russia, and they are saying, okay, that we hope that this deal will bring the two countries together to fight other things that we need to fight or other fights that we need to fight in the Middle East.
Yes.
Where is this getting into this equation?
Well, I think that the main issue which was discussed between Lavrov and Zarif was the Syrian crisis. Now, as the nuclear deal is in hand, the Iranians can do whatever they want to try and resolve other crises in the Middle East, especially the Syrian crisis. Iranians are very concerned with the situation of Bashar al-Assad. So that was discussed between Zarif during his visit last week in Syria and Lebanon. It will be discussed between Iran and the GCC states next month. And it was probably discussed between Zarif and Lavrov. It was also probably discussed between Soleimani and Lavrov, if indeed he was in Moscow, although it was denied by both the Iranians and the Russians.
So if we're looking right now at, let's say, an upcoming deal that should happen between Iran and Russia, what would it be?
Iran and Russia, okay.
Yes. What would it be? What can it be? It will be the S-300, or there are some deals that we don't know exactly?
I'm not sure Zarif even discussed this defense issues. I think the main issue was how to use Russia in order to promote the 4-point proposal of the Iranians, how to solve the Syrian affair. Now, we probably discussed bilateral relations as well. But I think the main issue was the regional conflicts in the Middle East and how to use Russia and Russian influence to try and solve all those crises.
In one sentence, do you think that they can trust the Russians?
They don't trust the Russians, but Russia is the only one who can help them to do that. They can't. They certainly don't trust the Americans, as Khamenei stated today.
Yes, definitely. Dr. Raz Zimet, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
For this. China's premier visited the site of last week's explosions in TIANJIN, a chemical warehouse, a disaster that killed at least 114 people and flattened part of the area. He oversaw search and rescue operations, stressing the need to monitor air, water, and soil quality. He also visited local residents temporarily relocated, as well as those wounded by the blast. The I-24 News Desk has more.
China's prime minister visited the blast of a major chemical disaster in Tianjin on Sunday, days after massive explosions flattened part of the city's industrial area. And as the premier also visited victims of what is now considered one of the worst industrial disasters in China. Hundreds of residents affected by the blast protested, demanding answers.
Now our home's been destroyed. Can the government give us an explanation? You can't just tell us all you're going to do is give us new windows. All they're going to do is change the windows? What about all the other stuff in the house? Why should we have to pay for this?
Many more are worried by the reports of large amounts of deadly sodium cyanide being stored at the site. While authorities insist toxins near the blast area pose no risk to people outside the evacuation zone, many are not convinced.
I'm really concerned about it, because it's extremely poisonous and there's such a huge amount. It's definitely going to have an impact on residents' lives. I'm already a long-time resident here, and so I'm directly affected.
Meanwhile, crews continue to search for residents and firefighters believed trapped in the debris. The death toll has now risen to 112. 95 people, mostly firefighters, are still missing. State media said on Sunday, suggesting the death toll will rise significantly. More than 720 people remain hospitalized, with dozens in serious condition.
Yes, and it's this time of the week, the beginning of the week in the United States. It's well over a year until Americans go to the polls to elect their new president. But even at this early stage, the race for the White House is grabbing headlines, defying expectations. Donald Trump continues to lead the chasing Republican pack, while in the Democrat camp, Hillary Clinton is facing a surprising challenge from Bernie Sanders. And Vice President Joe Biden hasn't even said yet whether he is going to run or not. And joining me tonight to understand a little bit more about what is happening in the last 7 days is Dov Lippman, political analyst and former member of Israeli Parliament. Good evening.
Good to be here, Lucy.
And also Sheldon Scher, spokesman for the American Democratic Party in Israel. For a long time, and I'm going to start here, for a long time now, I wanted to ask you, what do you think about Donald Trump?
What do I think about Donald Trump?
Yes.
He's interesting. He's fun. Will he be a serious candidate? Why not?
Why not?
I'll tell
really?
you why. I'll tell you why not.
Oh my God.
Okay, I'll tell you why not. First of all,
okay.
I'd like Donald Trump to be the candidate because it gives the Democrat a much better chance of winning, because I don't think that he's electable. All right, but I don't know why he's not electable. I'll tell you why. The job of a president is to run a $1 trillion corporation. He's got to manage people. He's got to develop policies. He's got to gain agreement among various different people.
And you're saying that he already has $1 trillion.
That's what no. But that's
them?
what the CEO of a large corporation does: to manage people, to manage money. That's exactly what the job of a president. A senator or a congressman. Most of the people running are senators. A senator or congressman doesn't have that managerial experience. A governor does, and the CEO does. So that's why I say, why not? Why not Donald Trump?
Can I say why not?
Yes. Yes, Donald, say, please.
The why not is because you want to have someone who's going to lead, who's going to inspire, who's going to bring the country somewhere. And this is a person who, as I watch, I watched that debate and I said, you know, I'm no longer an American citizen, but how? How is it possible that anyone is going to come out after that and say, we want him in that position? And yet the polls continue.
What is happening to the American people?
Well, until now, it's been his personality is what he's been putting forward. Yesterday, he came out with a 3-point plan against immigration to deal with immigration. In other words, he's starting to talk about issues and not just me. The first time he ran 4 years ago, it was just like a lark. He was having fun and he's a press, maybe to promote his own TV show. But now I think he's trying to be serious, being ahead. I don't think he's going to get it, though.
Let's really talk business. If he is let's say, presenting a plan, can really people believe that this guy will actually implement the plan?
Let me tell you, I'm looking at the polls, and let's put aside the national polls for the moment, where he continues to lead either 25%. Then you go to the likability. There, I would assume he's going to drop. And there, Carson is at 19%, but there's Trump at point number 2 in terms of people liking him and connecting with him. You go state by state in the early primaries. Iowa, he's ahead by 7. New Hampshire, he's ahead by 5. Florida, the state of Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, he's ahead by 1. There's something which is resonating with the people. And it has happened, not in the presidential election, but you have a governor in California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, coming out of nowhere. You have a wrestler in Minnesota, Jesse Ventura. It happens. There's something where people say, we're going to go for that guy. And remember, these polls...
Illinois, Barack Obama.
But I think there's a little bit of a difference there. But yes, in terms of the surprise factor...
Yeah, for sure. Now, Barack Obama will never give me an interview after I compare these two.
that comparison. But remember one other thing, Lucy. These polls are people who are likely voters at this time. Then you're going to bring in the rest of the mix who are going to come in. And if he's in the lead and he's attractive and people like him...
So let's try to, let's try to compare this situation to the Israeli elections. When there was a certain point when we said that the left is not waking up, and when it woke up, they lost it. You just lost the elections. Maybe the Democrats needs to wake up when they're seeing these polls, when they're seeing that he is gaining popularity, that he is likable.
Yeah, I'll tell you. There's one thing that's. I think there's one thing that's important is, are the people satisfied? Do they think that America's being run well? I mean, maybe you'd like this to be better, but are you generally satisfied with the direction America's taking? Or do you think you really need to change a lot? Okay? One of the reasons that Obama came in, he was a complete outsider. I mean, racially, his background and everything, and yet they wanted him because he was different. One of the reasons they wanted to shake things up. Mm-hmm. Well, what about now? Do they want to shake things up? Do they want to forget about the past and try something different? If that, there are a few novelty candidates like him, like the was it Carolyn Fiorina?
She's rising.
Who's also rising as this. There's some cute, fun candidates who offer a different perspective, and especially these people like Carson coming out of, he's a neurosurgeon, he's not a professional politician. Yeah. So these are people who can shake things up, and you want to try something exciting.
Yeah, but we are talking about the person, Donald Trump, that called, I think that he called the U.S. government stupid people who are running this country, and he literally called the.
Well, that's what I said. Is he going to put forth his personality and try to just charm his way in, or is he going to talk about the issues? Now that he's talking about, as I said, immigration, maybe he has other issues as well. If you debate the issues itself, you say that this person has good values and he represents American values, and this is a guy I like. Then maybe, he may have a chance. Although I really don't think he's going to find a way.
Two points. One is I agree with Sheldon that for sure people, they like the novelty candidate. And that's why, first of all, we've seen Carson on the rise. Carly Fiorina, she's now going to be in the national debate in CNN because she'll be in the top 10, and we could see her rise. I think that the traditional candidates, the conventional candidates, Walker and Bush, I think you're going to see them continue to go down, and perhaps these other candidates will rise. That's certainly point number one that has to be made. The other point that we have to remember is, and you asked about the Israeli elections in comparison, Netanyahu, in the end, he said certain things which shocked us. Yeah. They shocked us, but it resonated with people. People who had those feelings, and he knew he tapped those buttons, and that's what Trump is doing as well. I spoke to someone in the Republican Party today who said to me, he's saying all the things that we're thinking, but we would never say, and people like it.
Exactly.
People
exactly. Like it. Maybe, no one will dare to say it, but I want to, okay, let's try to wake up the sleepy in one way or another campaign of the Democrats, because it is a little bit sleepy. While he is doing headlines and he's talking all over the place, the Republicans are shaking up, like we're talking, shaking up things. The Democrats are like, okay, let's talk policy, let's talk this. We are like going on the safe. Maybe they should not go on the safe path.
First of all, you're talking two different parties. Forget about their ideology. Where they're coming from and how they're dealing with it is completely different. We have on the Democratic side Hillary Clinton leading by a tremendous amount. It's quite it's unlikely, really, that anyone can catch her. If she makes some serious mistakes, if somehow this email scandal breaks open, or she stubs her toe and she falls, then it's possible that someone else might come in. Joe Biden, for example, is standing on the side. Most of the people who would support Biden have already pledged their money to Hillary. That's why he's sitting on the outside. If she were to fall, he would probably put himself forward, and he probably would have a chance greater than any of the others. But she has to fall. Otherwise, she's the likely candidate. Now, she is establishment. We know what she stands for. She's been out there. We know her, she's a given thing, and she represents the government as it is. She's not an outsider, like some of the Republicans. The Republican Party has not defined itself. Is it a liberal? Is it middle of the road? Are they going to go for the Tea Party and become very conservative? You have candidates representing, with 17 candidates, it's wide open.
Unfortunately, one sentence.
One sentence. On the Democratic side, they were all on one stage together on Friday night. People were telling me that Martin O'Malley was very impressive compared to everyone else. If Hillary begins to fall, keep her eyes out for him. That's all I'll say.
Okay, this is going to be interesting. Thank you very, very much for this.
Pleasure.
When you think of archaeology in Israel, you tend to think of Jerusalem or Caesarea, structures of Jewish or Roman heritage. Many forget the region is also home to many Islamic sites. One of them, on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, is now the focus of a joint German and Israeli project to preserve what's left of it. Mira Savir went to the site to find out more.
Khirbat al-Minya, located just off the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, was once the palace of a caliphate, but now barely has any walls. Archaeologists believe it was built at the beginning of the 8th century.
In the 1930s, the Germans, they found an inscription at the gate, and this inscription says this building was built by the commander of the faithful, Al-Walid.
Khirbat al-Minya was excavated in the 1930s by a German team. The site itself is on the property of the German Association of the Holy Land. Now in 2015, they're starting a new effort to preserve it, a joint project between Germany and the Israeli Nature and Parks Authority.
There's a very long history of German commitment to the site. There's a responsibility because the German excavators left the site in 1939. It's a good custom. The person who excavates a site has also to take care about the preservation after the excavation ends.
Because of budget constraints, they couldn't preserve the entire palace at this moment. So what they decided to do is focus on this structure around me, which is the gateway to the palace itself.
First of all, we want to prevent water from getting into the structure, so there won't be any future damage. After that, we want to take care of the design and preservation of the stones themselves.
The project will begin in November and should take 3 weeks to a month, and Orlin says they hope to continue doing more work on the site.
After, the sky's the limit.
Dr. Katya Tsitrin was part of a Hebrew University team that excavated the site in 2005. She gave us a tour of what was once the Great Palace.
When we visit such sites, we need lots of imagination. Within this wall, we can see the prayer niche, what's called mihrab. And what's interesting here in Minya, this is one of the places that were most affected in terms of visually saying. You can see here the results of the earthquake best.
It is believed several earthquakes shook the palace, but Tsitrin says one in 1033 ultimately destroyed it. Minya served a purpose even after the Umayyad period.
This is a furnace that belonged to a stage of Khirbat al-Minya when this was actually a sugar production factory. This started during the Crusader period, and actually we can say that Minya was part of this industrial revolution.
In the 1930s, the Germans excavated the private unit, an area Tsitrin says is quite special.
This whole area was covered with geometric mosaics, each one different with a different composition. They're here. They are actually here under us.
Islamic archaeology isn't one that is often studied or visited, but Tsitrin says in recent years it has become a more popular time period to study. And for visitors, it's important to remember it is part of the history.
The public should understand that this is part of the cultural heritage of Israel, and they should care for it. And they should also demand more explanations and more knowledge about each of the sites.
Tsitrin says she hopes they can come back to Khirbat al-Minya, not only to preserve it, but to continue excavating to see what else they may find.
maybe more knowledge can bring to more tolerance. And to someone who's really tolerant, Dr. Alex Coleman, value creation expert, good evening.
Hello, Lucy.
You're going to make me a little bit upset, right? We're going to talk about capitalism in its best.
Exactly.
In its finest.
At its smelliest.
Please.
Well, it turns out that FTSE 100, these are the 100 largest companies on the London Stock Exchange, CEOs make 183 times the salary of the average employee.
Let me just, it ran, I think that it's ran like that. 182 times, 83? 82 what?
83.
Potato. Well, it's like...
Imagine a whole building filled with employees and the CEO makes this amount. So you print the salaries for the month of August. You print all the salaries, you calculate the average salary, and the CEO takes 183 such salaries.
Oh my God. How can you get to this point where you are earning much, much, much more from all the rest of your employees?
Well, the word is greed. And it was not always like that. Last year, it was only 50% lower than that, and this year it was 50% higher. But just to give you an impression, McDonald's CEO makes $7.3 million a year.
$7.3 million a year,
yes.
Okay. And
1.1 million out of that are called tip.
Oh, tip?
That's the type of tip that I like, leaving people 1 million.
Who's tipping him?
He's basically tipping himself. The average employee is making $11,000 a year.
$11,000 a year?
Originally, I thought it was a month.
It's less than $1,000 a month.
Less, right? It's exactly.
It's unbelievable what you're saying.
Actually, they came up with a help for their employees, how they could not starve, how they could buy cheap food and somehow survive with these.
But it's not even healthy food.
No, it's junk food. It's the ultimate junk food.
You know, just in one sense, this doesn't make like problems inside a company with the employees?
Well, originally the trick of capitalism was that you look at the CEO, you say, wow, he's making 7.3. If I'm good enough, I'm going to close up. But in reality, it doesn't happen. In reality, you're shut out.
It doesn't happen because in reality, there is only one CEO and maybe 2 or 3 in a lot more.
And millions of sad people trying to survive.
We're not sad. We're not sad, Alex.
No,
we're not sad.
On the contrary. But we're not buying McDonald's either.
No. We're going out for a break, an update from our news desk, and then we will be back for the third part. Welcome back to the news today. Israel's recent force-feeding law, which allows the state to force-feed prisoners on hunger strikes, has caused a lot of controversy, and many doctors have said that if they will be called on, they will refuse to implement it. The law also calls into question the issue of human rights in the Western world, namely, how should prisoners be treated? Can the state impose its will on a prisoner on a hunger strike? Joining me tonight to talk about this is Dr. Hani Zubaydah, political science at the Israel Valley Academic College. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
And also Professor Abraham Sion, chairman of the Center for Law and Mass Media at the Ariel University.
Good evening.
You know, Professor Sion, I'm asking myself, maybe we are just too harsh on ourselves. Maybe Israel is not that bad. Maybe this is something that is happening all around the world, but when it comes to Israel, everybody's saying, you know what? You are really bad in human rights.
I agree with you entirely. I think the double standard is very obvious when it comes to Israel, almost in everything. And one of the things is that we're talking about the legal system in Israel, which is, I think, one of the best in the world. And the fact that people are taken, terrorists are taken into custody on an administrative matter. This is something that, first of all, started with it was at the time of the British Mandate, and it's still now. And it's used only for very particular cases that are in the extreme. Now, you must understand that to come to a court of law, you need all the evidence. Sometimes you have the evidence, but you cannot use this evidence because then you will reveal all sorts of secrets that the authorities don't want to reveal. So there is no alternative but to go into administrative custody, and even then you have to come to a judge once in 6 months, and he has to review the thing. The fact that the judge is a military judge is of very little concern, because he's a judge. Even if he's a military judge, he is still a judge.
Maybe all around the world the situation is not better. Maybe if we're looking at the United States, at Guantanamo Bay, if we're looking at Europe,
French.
if we were looking at the French, it's not better. So what?
Well, it has nothing to do with the fact that it's not better. While the French took their prisoners of war to Africa to torment them, and the Brits did the same thing in parts of the kingdom, and what we're doing, I don't care. I am not British, I'm not French, and I'm not, well, partly not American. What I look is at the standard of this country. While some people might say, if I may, women all around us in the Middle East suffer worse than the women in Israel. I don't care. I want women to be equal citizens of Israel. Now, the thing is, whether we should compare ourselves to other places or whether we should have some sort of standard which will be equal to all. The thing here in Israel, which is extremely delicate, is the fact that we see time and time again that we might talk about administrative incarceration, we might talk about force feeding, we might talk about various things, but usually it relates to one population, the Arabs. Usually they suffer the consequences of the lack of human rights. Now, the question whether they go into military courts or civilian court is also a question, because most of the military courts pertain to Arabs and not Jews.
Only recently it started, let's say, the cases of Jewish in front of military courts started...
which became a huge mayhem in Israel, because 3 Israelis were incarcerated due to administrative issues, and then the decision was that administrative incarceration would be brought into a military court. 3 Israelis, huge mayhem in Israel. Now, the thing is, I do not really care. What I care about is the simple fact. I want equal rights to all. I disagree with the fact, because while people are brought to administrative incarceration, the thing is that there's no evidence. What the argument is, their lawyers cannot see the evidence. There are no evidence. They are incarcerated due to the fact that they might in the future do some damage or felony or terror act or so on and so forth. And that is a problem according to any democratic standard. You cannot arrest someone due to future happenings, and that is a problem.
Well, first of all, I disagree with you on this, because in most cases there is evidence. I was myself a military judge, and I can tell you, usually there is evidence, but the evidence cannot be revealed. This is most of the time.
But
sometimes it is to prevent something of happening, because I agree on this matter, but this is I would say this is like 20-30%. 70% you do have that. Now, you were saying, you're talking about why is it only with the Arabs? You're forgetting one thing. Terrorism in Israel is done by the Arabs.
Occupation on a certain
there is no occupation. Now, this is a different matter. We can discuss.
There is no occupation,
but there is no occupation.
And
under international law, there is no occupation.
Then the Arabs in the West Bank and Judea and Samaria are not under occupation. They're full citizens of Israel.
Sorry?
They are full citizens of Israel with full rights.
No, but it's not under occupation.
Then how would you?
When you're talking about occupation, you don't mean just occupation. You mean belligerent occupation, according to international law. There is no belligerent occupation. I can occupy my home. You see, I can occupy my home. This is not considered occupation.
Home.
The meaning of occupation that your intention is, you're talking about belligerent occupation. There is no belligerent occupation under international law. But let's leave this aside.
But if we're talking about terror, you know, this definition is totally changed in the last few months. There is Jewish terrorism, or let's say there is terrorism,
but
okay?
there is some big difference. There is a big difference.
What is the difference between a Jewish terrorist and an Arab terrorist?
I'll tell you what the difference is. When it comes to Arab terrorism, it's accepted by the community. It's not only accepted, but it's also condoned. It's something that is considered shaheed. If you, for example, murder, yeah, a martyr. If you take a knife and you kill a child which is 3 months old in his cradle, this was accepted by the whole community.
Yeah, but if
when
you
it
will
comes
ask the Jewish extremists in the Judea and Samaria, they will tell you, yes, we accept that. We are praising the killing of Arabs. It's okay.
Nobody has accepted what happened in the Jewish extremists when they made this terror attack. When this made this
what you're saying, the difference is, Professor Zain, the differences between the acceptance of the society or the differences within human rights. Because if we're talking about the acceptance of society, we can go back to the pre-state days in Israel, in which terrorism was widely accepted by the Jewish society as well. Etzel, Lehi, and so on and so forth, and the Jewish underground.
That was not terrorism, but that's again a different matter. You're going back now 60 years. This is a different discussion. That was not terrorism.
But
because when you blow up King David Hotel, and you tell people beforehand that they can leave the place an hour and a half beforehand, this is not considered terrorism.
You're taking one case in particular, but you're not taking other cases in which there were actions against soldiers. But what I'm asking is a simple question. Are we discussing the way that we as a state give human rights as a part of a decision in looking at acceptance or non-acceptance of the society of terrorism? The question
this is of great importance. This is of great importance because
I can agree with that.
If the community
However, I disagree with the fact that the state should not take that into consideration discussing human rights. Human rights should be unanimous to all the people who live under the state.
Right.
But they're not the same.
No, they are.
No, they're not.
They are. Because those people who committed the crime will be caught, will be punished, and will be sentenced to life.
Let me try to look at it from the let's say from the perspective of Western countries. French people, are they all, like, let's say France, Britain, are they treating their minorities the same way that they are treating people who are all their lives lived in Britain, or let's say I don't want to use the word pure.
Yeah,
but,
well, you're talking about British versus non-British, or French versus non-French. Well, according to the French Constitution, at least the French people, what they do is they treat them all the same, better or worse. On the one hand, they're not allowing any type of religious symbols in the public sphere. So if a young Muslim woman would like to come with the burqa to school, she's not allowed to. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, she's allowed into every institution that the state offers. Now, the question is whether they have a military court, whether everybody is looking at a civilian court, whether they have administrative incarcerations. Yeah. They do not. The administrative incarceration, while I can agree or disagree with Professor Zain, I assume he knows the number, you cannot have someone sit in prison while his lawyer does not see the facts against him.
Unfortunately, gentlemen, I don't have more time, although I really wanted to continue this discussion, but I don't. Thank you very, very much for this.
Thank you.
And we're staying here. 10 years ago, Israel withdrew its settlers and soldiers from the Gaza Strip. 8,000 Israelis from the Gaza Strip and the north of the West Bank were evacuated, most amid furious opposition. I-24 News Inside program looks at what happened and what it led to.
The disengagement plan will reduce frictions between them and us. It will require harsh and difficult steps.
The settlers keep denying reality. They refuse to believe that IDF soldiers will be able to throw them out of their houses and off the lands they believe to be theirs. Israel is then flooded with demonstrations, one of the largest the country had ever known. Over 100,000 people opposing the disengagement go as far as creating a human chain 90 kilometers long, starting in Gush Katif and ending in Jerusalem.
And with me right now is TV host Jonathan Reagan.
Good evening.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm trying to keep it clear and easy.
It's been working for 40 seconds now.
Yes.
We're doing great. We're doing great.
And no, it's not working anymore. Let's talk about Djokovic.
Yes, tennis. Yesterday we spoke of Serena Williams, who encountered some problems on the way to the US Open. Now it's happened to world number one in the men's circuit, Novak Djokovic, losing to Andy Murray in the final in Montreal. Murray and Djokovic may be the two best tennis players in the world right now, and Andy Murray surely making a statement, beating Djokovic in 3 sets, just 2 weeks ahead of the US Open. You should take me into account when you look at the favorites in Flushing Meadows. A great game by Andy Murray. Let's remember, Murray won his first Grand Slam in New York in 2012, beating in the final against Djokovic. So obviously these two, it's a very interesting thing in their finals. Djokovic beat Murray in the last 8 games they played.
8 games.
Last time Murray beat Djokovic, when was it? In the final of Wimbledon, 2013. They also faced each other this year in the Australian Open final, in the semi-final in Roland Garros. Will we see them again in the final in New York? Will not be a big surprise.
I believe so. And you'll be up to see it.
Yes, yes, I will.
Of course, just tell me what the results are.
Absolutely, that's what I'm here for.
Barcelona.
Barcelona. In Spain, they call this remontada. Barcelona are facing Athletic Bilbao tonight in the second leg of the Spanish Super Cup after losing 4-0 in the first leg in Bilbao. Remontada, what does it mean? Major, major comeback. Now, the people in Barcelona believe they can do it. They can, by the way, score 4 goals against Athletic Bilbao. The only problem is their defense. They won the European Super Cup over the weekend, but conceding 4 goals against Seville. They won that game 5-4. They conceded another 4 goals in Bilbao on Friday. So will they be able to do it? Of course, Messi, Neymar, Suarez, they're all there, but their defense is not looking very good. An interesting game indeed.
I always said that their problem is the defense.
That's why you're the football analyst.
Of course.
Of course you are the. Yes.
Just every time that you want to.
4-4-2. We always speak about
4-4-2-2, 3-3-5.
Yes, yes.
Crazy.
5-3-1 and so on. Yes.
One day I will surprise you. I swear to God.
I'm looking forward.
Yes, I will surprise you. I'm
looking forward.
You know what?
Hold on.
Hold on.
Hold on.
Hold on. Crazy plane.
Yes,
thing.
Flying people indeed this time. Yesterday you were asking me why these people jump from all these places.
Yeah.
So now...
And do they earn money?
Yes, a lot of money, by the way.
Okay.
Now we're crazy people that are flying at a relatively slow distance of only 370 kilometers per hour, going through all these things. That's the Air Race World Championship. And Paul Bonhomme won the home race in Ascot in the UK. He's also leading the overall rankings, and Matt Hall from Australia was second. It's very easy. After you do the football commentating, you can do this. Just move the joystick.
Just like driving.
Just like 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it's 1, 2, 3. You know, this is like piece of cake. I don't know what you're talking about. It's like doing this acrobat,
left, right, up and down through these things.
Just
easy
like
peasy.
Flip-flops and things like that.
Yes. Who are these people that we call them crazy anyway?
I don't know.
So easy.
It's really easy. We're doing it every day.
Of course, that's how I go home now.
It's just like,
yes.
Fly away.
Fly out of here.
Fly away. Jonathan Rega, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy.
And that's it for tonight. Tomorrow we will be here again at the same time, same place from the Jaffa Port, Israel. We're flying out. Good night.